My buddy Doyle was supposed to pick me up at 6:30 Monday morning. He showed up at 6:15, which is exactly what Doyle does. I was still loading my bag into the trunk of his truck when he handed me a thermos of black coffee and said, 4 days. No wives, no obligations, no cell signal. Let's go. I laughed and got in. We were heading to his family's old fishing cabin up near Lake Hendricks, about 3.5 hours northeast of the city. Doyle had been going up there since he was 8 years old. His grandfather built it, his uncle maintained it, and now Doyle was the one who kept the pipes from freezing every winter. He'd put in a new water heater 2 summers ago and ran a satellite line for internet, which he justified by saying he needed it for work emails, but which we both knew was mostly for watching football. My wife knew I was going. We'd talked about it the week before. She smiled, told me to have fun, asked me to text when I got there if I had signal. She seemed perfectly fine. Normal. That's the part I keep coming back to, even now. She seemed completely, totally fine. We got to the cabin around 10 that morning. Doyle made eggs and I unpacked. We spent the afternoon out on the water, caught nothing worth keeping, drank a couple beers, and argued about which team was going to collapse first in the second half of the season. It was exactly what I needed. Work had been grinding me down for months, and I hadn't realized how tense my shoulders were until they finally let go somewhere around mile 2 of the drive up. That first night after dinner, Doyle was on his laptop. I was reading. The fire was going. It was quiet in the way that only places without traffic noise can be quiet. Then Doyle said, "Hey, come look at this." His voice was careful. Not panicked, but careful. I know Doyle well enough to hear the difference. I put down my book. He turned the laptop toward me slowly, like he was handling something that might break. On the screen was a profile page. One of those dating sites, not the mainstream ones, something I'd never heard of. And there, in the main photo, was my wife. I didn't say anything for a long moment. I just looked. The photo was recent. She was wearing a green blouse I'd picked out for her birthday 2 years ago. Her hair was down. She was smiling that specific smile she has when she's being photographed, and she knows it. There were 3 more photos below it, all recent, all ones I'd never taken and never seen. I found it by accident, Doyle said quietly. I was on here a while back after Sandra and I split. I recognized her immediately. I'm sorry, man. I read the profile. The username was something innocuous, meaningless. The bio said she was looking for a connection. Said she was in a complicated situation. Said she was available weekday afternoons and the occasional weekend. Weekday afternoons, she works from home. As for 2 years, I set the laptop down on the coffee table and walked to the window and looked out at the dark water. I don't know how long I stood there. Is it possible it's fake? I asked. I already knew the answer. I needed to hear myself ask anyway. Doyle said he'd thought about that. He'd checked the photo dates on the site's metadata, or whatever he called it. The newest one was uploaded 11 days ago, and the green blouse photo, he'd zoomed in on the background. There was a corner of our living room bookshelf visible, our specific bookshelf with the specific crack in the 3rd shelf that I've been meaning to fix for a year. I sat back down. How long has this been up? I asked. The profile's been active at least 3 months, maybe more. 3 months. I tried to think back 3 months. What was I doing? What were we doing? We'd gone to her sister's wedding in July. We'd driven to the coast for Labor Day weekend. I'd made her coffee every single morning. 3 months. Doyle closed the laptop. He looked at me straight. What do you want to do? I told him I didn't know, and then I said I wanted to go home. He shook his head. Not yet, he said. Not tonight. He said it the way you say something when you mean it, absolutely. I've known Doyle for 19 years. He's been through his own version of this. Sandra left him for someone she met at a conference, and the way he handled it, the way he didn't burn everything to the ground, cost him a lot but saved him more. He's the kind of person who does the hard math in a situation, even when every instinct says to stop doing math and start throwing things. I trusted him. Barely, but I trusted him. He took screenshots of everything on the profile. Then he said we needed to think before we moved. We talked for 3 hours that night. We talked about what I knew, what I didn't know, what I needed to find out before I walked through that door. Doyle had learned things from his divorce that I never wanted to know, but I needed to know them now. The next morning, I called in to work. I told them a family situation had come up. I wasn't lying. We drove back. Doyle insisted we take his second vehicle, a plain gray sedan he used for hauling things, so nothing would tip her off. She thought I was at the cabin for 4 days. She thought she had until Thursday. I didn't go to my house, not yet. Doyle drove past it slowly, and I saw her car in the driveway and another car I didn't recognize, parked halfway down the block. Doyle kept driving. He parked in the lot behind the pharmacy 2 streets over and looked at me. "We don't go in," he said. "Not like this." I gripped the door handle and said nothing. "You go in there now," he said, "and you've got nothing but your anger, and anger doesn't hold up in court." I let go of the handle. We went to Doyle's apartment instead. He had a contact, a woman named Pamela, a family law attorney who had handled his case 2 years prior. He called her and explained the situation in the broad strokes. She said she could speak with me that afternoon. I called from Doyle's kitchen. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was measured professional. Not warm exactly, but not cold either. Competent. I needed competent. She asked me what I had. I told her about the profile, the photos, the timestamps. She asked if there was anything else, anything at the house, any evidence of someone actually being there. I told her about the car I didn't recognize. She said before you do anything else, you need documentation, and you need to be smart about how you get it. Doyle and I went back to the house the next morning when I knew she'd be at her Tuesday yoga class. She went every Tuesday at 9, had for 3 years. I went in through the back, moved quickly. I pulled my passport and our financial documents from the file cabinet in the office. I transferred half of our joint savings to a new account I'd opened at a different bank that morning. I set up a camera. Doyle had a spare trail cam from hunting season, on the bookshelf in the living room, angled to cover the main area. I was in and out in under 20 minutes. Doyle sat outside in the gray sedan the entire time, watching the street. He texted me twice. 2 taps for clear, 3 taps meant move. I got 2 taps both times. That night, back at Doyle's apartment, I texted her. Just the usual. Said the fishing was slow, but the weather was good. Said I missed her. She wrote back within 2 minutes. Said she missed me too. Said she was going to cook my favorite when I got home Thursday. I read that message 4 times. I still don't fully understand how a person does that. Doyle poured 2 glasses of whiskey and set one in front of me without asking. We didn't say anything for a while. She could have a reason, he said eventually. Not defending her, just being honest. What reason covers this? I asked. He didn't answer. Because there wasn't one. Not really, but that word, reason, it stayed with me. I didn't know it yet, but it would matter later. That Wednesday, I met with Pamela in person. Her office was small and organized and smelled like coffee and old paper. She was in her late 40s, sharp eyes, direct manner. She looked at the screenshots Doyle had taken, at the trail cam footage from the night before, which I will not describe in detail, but which confirmed everything and then some, and she said, "You have more than enough." She walked me through the process. She told me what I could reasonably expect given the specifics of our situation. The infidelity documentation, the asset split, the question of support. She was honest about the hard parts. I appreciated that she didn't try to soften them. At one point, she asked me, as she apparently asked all clients, "Is reconciliation something you're considering?" I said no. She nodded and kept going. But she said something at the end of that meeting that I've thought about since. She said, "In my experience, when the deception is this planned and this sustained, there's usually something underneath it that the person couldn't figure out how to say out loud." She wasn't asking me to forgive anything. She was just saying it. I filed it away. I went back to Doyle's apartment. I ran 8 miles that afternoon because I didn't know what else to do with my body. Doyle ordered pizza. We watched whatever was on. I slept 4 hours. Thursday came. The plan had been that I'd come home Thursday afternoon. I didn't go home. Pamela called her instead afternoon. I didn't go home. Used my phone so she'd pick up. She picked up on the first ring. I heard her voice through the speaker. "Ryan, hey, are you almost home?" And something in my chest did something I don't have a word for. Pamela identified herself. Told her she was my attorney. Told her I was fine. But I hadn't been heard, that the situation she'd been given to understand was a misunderstanding. My wife went very quiet on the other end. Then she started asking questions fast, overlapping, her voice climbing. Pamela answered each one in a level tone. When she got to the part where she said she was calling to inform her that I would be seeking dissolution of the marriage, my wife made a sound that I'll probably carry for a long time. Pamela wrapped it up, gave her the name of a colleague she could contact for representation, and ended the call. She looked at me across the desk. "That's the hardest part," she said. It gets more procedural after this. It did not feel more procedural. But I understood what she meant. Doyle drove me to get a longer-term rental car that afternoon. I started looking at short-term furnished apartments. I couldn't go back to that house. I knew that the moment I'd looked at the trail cam footage, some things you can't unsee and then pretend the walls don't know what happened in them. 2 days later, Pamela called and told me I needed to come in. There was something she needed me to hear in person. I drove to her office. She had the door closed before I'd even fully sat down. She told me she'd spoken with my wife that morning. Not as her attorney, my wife still hadn't retained representation. She'd come to Pamela's office on her own, unannounced. Pamela had led her in because, she told me, she thought I needed to know what she had to say before we went any further. I told her to go ahead. She said my wife had been trying to have a baby. I sat with that for a second. We'd been trying. For 14 months. It hadn't happened. She'd had tests. I'd had tests. The doctor had said my numbers were low. Not zero, but low. We talked about next steps. IVF had come up. The cost had come up too. We bought our house 18 months ago and we were stretched thin. We'd agreed to keep trying naturally for a while longer and revisit. Or I thought we'd agreed on that. Pamela slid a document across the desk to me. A lab report. My wife had submitted a sample without my knowledge to a different clinic 8 months ago. The results confirmed what our doctor had told us. Low count. She'd found men through the site who matched my general description, my height, my build, my coloring. She'd verified they were healthy. She'd kept the encounters in a narrow window she calculated would be the most useful. She was going to tell me she was pregnant and the baby was mine. I put my forehead on the desk. Pamela said nothing for a minute. Then she said, she also checked every one of them for current STI testing before anything happened. I know that doesn't make it less of a betrayal. I'm just telling you everything she told me. I asked why she didn't just talk to me. Pamela said that was the part that came out the most when she spoke with her. My wife said she couldn't. She said she knew how much I cared about being physically capable, about being strong, about, she used the phrase I used once apparently, about handling things. She said she didn't want me to feel like I'd failed her. She said she thought if she got pregnant, and I never knew, I would never have to feel that. I want to be very clear. I'm not telling this part of the story so that anyone feels sorry for her. What she did was a betrayal. It was planned, it was sustained. It was a fundamental deception. The reasons don't undo it. But I would be lying if I said I didn't sit in that office and feel something other than anger for the first time in a week. I told Pamela I still wanted to proceed. She nodded. She said she understood. She said you understood. She said there was one more thing. My wife had gone to her doctor the morning after Pamela's call and had taken steps to make sure there would be no pregnancy to consider. Pamela said the doctor had confirmed it. She said she thought I should know that too because if we went to court and it came up, I would need to have processed it beforehand. I don't think I said anything for a while. Doyle was waiting outside in the car when I came out. He took one look at me and didn't ask anything, just started driving. We went to a diner about 15 minutes away and sat in a corner booth, and he ordered coffee and I ordered coffee, and we sat there for a long time. I told him everything eventually. He was quiet for a while after. Then he said, "That's the saddest version of trying to protect someone I've ever heard." I didn't agree with that out loud, but I didn't disagree either. The negotiation took 2 more weeks. My wife retained an attorney, a decent one, older guy named Wendell, low-key, reasonable. Pamela had recommended him quietly because she didn't want this to get ugly. It didn't get ugly mostly. There was one moment in the conference room. My wife and Wendell were on one side of the table, Pamela and I on the other. It was the first time I'd seen her since I left. She looked like she hadn't been sleeping. Her hair was pulled back. She had her hands flat on the table in front of her, and she was looking at them when I walked in. At some point during the meeting, Pamela presented the documentation, the full package, the profile, the timestamps, the footage. She set the printed photographs in front of Wendell without ceremony. My wife looked up at me, not at the photos, at me. And then she put her face in her hands. I looked at the wall behind her. I kept my hands still. Wendell said something to Pamela about the terms. Pamela responded. The conversation kept going. The machinery of it kept going. I let it. We reached an agreement that afternoon. The house would be sold. The proceeds would be split with adjustments for my documented financial preparations. There was no child to factor in. Support was arranged for a limited period. It was fair. I made sure it was fair. I don't know exactly why that was important to me, but it was. I moved into a furnished apartment in a neighborhood I didn't know very well. It had a good running path nearby, which Doyle pointed out when he helped me carry boxes in, as if that was the key selling point. I started seeing a therapist. Pamela had connected me with someone, and I went mostly because I was exhausted and out of other ideas. It turned out to be useful, more useful than I expected. Doyle came by most Thursdays. We'd get food, watch the game, talk about nothing. Sometimes we'd talk about the real stuff. He told me once, maybe 2 months after I moved in, that watching me go through this had made him go back to his own therapist for the first time in a year. I told him I was glad something good came out of it. He told me to shut up. We finished the game. The house sold in 6 weeks. The last spousal support payment was scheduled for the end of the following spring. After that, all of it would be finished. Whatever that means. Pamela had mentioned during one of our final paperwork meetings that a colleague of hers ran a lecture series on property law and invited her to come speak about family law intersections. She'd mentioned it the way people mention things when they want you to respond to them. I said it sounded interesting. She said she thought I might like it, actually. Said there was a good bar a block away that hosted a mixer afterward. I told her that when she was no longer my attorney, she could tell me more about it. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, March. Last payments in March. She turned back to her papers. I drove home in the dark. The apartment was quiet. I made coffee, stood at the window, watched a car move slowly down the wet street below. I thought about the cabin, about the way the water looked that first afternoon, flat and silver and completely still, about how I'd felt my shoulders let go somewhere around mile 2 of that drive. I thought about how fast things can change, how normal something can look from the outside right up until the moment it isn't. And I thought about March. For the first time in a long time, I let myself think about what came after. I've thought a lot about what the actual turning point was. Not the moment I found out, that was just the moment the floor disappeared. The actual turning point was when I chose to sit back down in Doyle's truck instead of getting out. That sounds small. It wasn't. There's something that happens to a person when they've been deceived by someone they trusted completely. The mind wants to do something immediate and physical because the pain has no other outlet. I understand now why people make decisions in those moments that cost them everything: their freedom, their finances, their dignity. The feeling is that overwhelming. I was not noble. I was not calm. I was gripping that door handle with every intention of walking down that street and making everything worse. What stopped me was one person saying, clearly and without apology, "Not like this." And 19 years of knowing that person meant I believed him when no part of me wanted to. That's the first thing I'd want anyone to take from this. Not that you should suppress what you feel. The anger was real and it was warranted. But that acting from the center of that feeling rarely protects you. It mostly just gives the situation another victim. Doyle had learned that the hard way. I got to learn it from watching him instead of from a jail cell or a courtroom that didn't go the way I needed it to. The second thing is harder to say, and I want to be careful about how I say it. Leah was wrong. What she did was a serious, sustained betrayal. The deception alone, months of it, planned, deliberate, was enough. I'm not walking that back. But when Pamela told me the reason, when I finally understood what she had been trying to solve and why she thought she couldn't come to me with it, I had to sit with the fact that I had contributed to the silence, not to the choices she made. Those were hers, but the silence, I had told her in ways I didn't even notice at the time, that there were certain failures I wouldn't handle well. I cared about being capable. I said that once, apparently. She heard it louder than I ever intended. Intelligence isn't only about gathering information. It's about asking what you might be broadcasting without knowing it. I was smart about the documentation, about the finances, about the legal process. I was less smart about the atmosphere I'd been building inside my own marriage. Those two things can both be true at the same time. The last thing's about what comes after. Recovery isn't one feeling. It's not one decision. I started therapy because I was out of options, not because I believed in it. It turned out to be the most useful thing I did in that entire period, not because it gave me answers, but because it helped me sort out which questions were worth asking. There's a difference between sitting in your own pain and actually moving through it. For a long time, I was doing the first one and calling it the second. I moved into an apartment I didn't love in a neighborhood I didn't know. I ran on a path along the canal most mornings. I went back to work. I had dinner with Doyle on Thursdays. Slowly, something that had been locked down started to loosen. March came. The last payment cleared. Pamela sent me a brief, professional email confirming the final paperwork was complete. And then, because she is the kind of person who says exactly what she means without making a performance of it, she sent a second email. 2 sentences. It mentioned the lecture series. It mentioned the bar down the block. I read it twice. Then I wrote back. I don't know what that becomes. But for the first time in a long time, I was genuinely curious to find out. And that specific feeling of being curious about what comes next instead of dreading it, that's what getting through something actually feels like. I know that now.